Where'd you get that?
No, this is,
I was gonna say, because we haven't even covered the EIR thing. With this weird power wheel.
I dug out this one.
You're gonna get plenty of opportunity to be in those.
I don't know.
Well, we're talking about the conventional, the E, the I, the R thing. You know, I equals E over R, I remember that, and I don't remember any of the power wheel stuff. So I don't know what the difference is, why we're not doing.
The E, we're just using V versus E.
Okay.
And it depends on the industry and which book you use. But volts is volts and electrons.
Sometimes it's C, sometimes it's B up there.
Well, it seems to me like they use the E for like a power source and then use the V when you're in the circuit somewhere, but.
It's possible. I haven't really noticed. It's kind of like that thing where I ask you your weight and you give it to me in pounds. Typically, I'll ask for E. You know, on the answer sheet, it'll say E with a little T for E total, or E for R1. So it's asking the voltage, and we give it in volts.
I dug that out on the brake line. I found a bunch of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't realize I had any of this stuff. I even
Almost
studied
they
it.
gave it down there repaired.
Yeah.
You want more light? Yeah.
So I studied more stuff and I
Yeah, you can turn it. Well, I was gonna turn it on
remember
anyways.
a damn bit of it.
That's it, man. Let me get what you
Try out over here. These bright ones are actually sunlight.
I like, yeah.
Yeah.
Sonic too.
I forgot about that. That's why later in the evening it gets darker in here. 'Cause these start to dim. That's sunlight.
So you also say. Thanks, Doc. So you see that thing was printing my part. It was on Today's Show this morning, but something else, it was Santa Clarita. I'm kind of hard on it. Must be sliding in the car. He pulls up alongside it, he kick it, the car fucking slams in, he goes over and pushes the guy, he just pushes him over. Really? And the guy in the car over corrects, he goes back, and he goes in the next lane, takes the other car in the rear end, and that car actually goes, boom, and it hits into the center divider, right in front of the guy in the car, and then it bounces away, and the guy on the bike just keeps going, and then the original got started, he was on the upside down.
Oh my God.
So I was talking about that pit bull yesterday. Yeah. Aircraft damage on flight 282 on the 22nd of July. Inbound 282 from San Diego to JFK, Gate 8 ramp control was notified by the captain to be careful when opening the forward cargo compartment door. Below is the ramp personnel statement. At 21:35 hours, I received a call from ramp control advising me that the cockpit called about a noise heard in the forward compartment. I checked the offload of the aircraft inbound, and there was a dog and some mice where they were being transported through a lab or who knows what. We started to open the cargo door of the aircraft, and I noticed the curtain fastener was sticking out from the bottom of the door. I had Mr. G turn on the lights and peep in the vent hole. I saw a pit bull staring at me. The captain came down and I asked him if he could see if the passenger was on board. As I ran up to see if he was able to get the passenger, he was escorting the passenger down the bridge. We repositioned the belt loader, and Mr. G, the passenger, and myself went up to get the livestock, or the dog. The passenger held the canine's collar to calm him down, and we proceeded to open the cargo door fully. I then assisted the passenger to place the canine in the kennel. As I attempted to secure the kennel's door, I noticed that the bottom rod was bent, and I was unable to get it to lock. I called Mr. D on the radio, advising him that the livestock on 282 was loose and the kennel was damaged. In addition to that,
That's funny.
what was that?
Who was going to release the livestock?
Sounds like a situation
somewhere in here.
you
Yeah.
involved.
I was going to release the livestock to the passenger at the terminal since there was no way I could ensure
He
that
got out,
the
he just lay in front of the counter waiting for me.
animal was going to get loose again. I escorted the passenger into the baggage claim area. Mr. G rode with the dog to ensure that he wouldn't break loose again. What was happening after we placed him back in the kennel and then into the cart was the pit bull kept hitting his head against the door of the kennel trying to get out again. Mr. D advised me that he was going to fax a copy of the airway bill so that I could have the passenger sign it for shipment. I stayed with the passenger for about 10 minutes in the terminal, and we checked the dog to make sure that there was no injury. I looked in his mouth, and his gums were okay, and there was no sign of any cuts or bruises. Mr. S came over to the inbound bag room and advised me that the dog had done some damage to the aircraft. I called Mr. H to advise him that there was damage to an aircraft and it was found on arrival. Mr. H and I walked over to the gate 8, and when we walked up the belt loader and looked at the F1 position, that's the first position of the aircraft, forward cargo compartment, we were in shock. The pit bull had clawed through the avionics access panel and ripped approximately 5 coaxial cables in the aircraft. According to Mr. S, the captain stated that he lost some communication during flight. I never looked in the cargo compartment when we first got the livestock. My main concern was getting the livestock to his owner safely. I really feel that we must revisit the way we tender shipments of livestock. So the airline did change their policy. I think it was animals over 50 pounds they wouldn't transport, or certain types, but I think it was 50 pounds or bigger. I can't remember, but I'll show you the pictures.
That's where you just put a service dog in, and take it on the plane again.
Yeah. Some bullshit dog going rogue on you.
So there's the forward cargo compartment.
Turn shit on.
Jesus.
Can you imagine their house?
I mean,
Yeah,
you could conceivably cause a fire or bring down an aircraft. It all depends. I mean, there's so much redundancy, it's unlikely, but you've got a live animal that's doing damage. Here are the coax cables. I think there's some zoom in pictures. But here's 3 cables right here. One up here and here and here. It's a fiberglass wall.
What the hell is this thing trying to do?
So it looks to me this might be a little bit of blood. Who can tell?
God.
I can email you all these if you want them.
Sure.
So you get a better
I have
image.
a history of pit bulls.
That's crazy.
Here's the cable. So here's like 1, 2, 3, 4. There might be a 5th one back
They
there.
were scared of the dark or something.
There's at least 6 cables in here. They're damaged. This is something. Something was here. You can see it ends there.
Here's my car ride home.
One dog wrecking crew.
Now they're not going to press charges against the owner because it was an accident.
Fight his ass.
What is that to sleep?
But,
Well, he's just got nervous traveling, that's all.
yeah, that's a delay.
Yeah, you think?
Just a little one.
Wow.
Holy.
It's like alien, look at that.
He'd also, I think it stated there somewhere, he'd also chewed on the corner of the box where the mice were.
He's trying to get his friends out.
I'm trying
Probably
to
just
get
wanted
a
me.
gang together. That would have been great, release all those mice into the aircraft. We had a cat in a 747 for almost 2 weeks. And we kept telling the passenger, we're still looking for it. We could hear it. And the flight attendants would hear it meowing during the flight. And, you military guys are in shock because that airplane would not take off again. But airlines are different. It flew for 2 weeks.
How'd the
And
cat?
we were, every single night, as we rotated different mechanics. And, I was talking a little bit about if you're working the hangar, one night you'll get fuselage, your team, you'll typically work with 9 or 12 people, and your group will get fuselage one night, fuselage exterior, another group will get wings, another group will get interior, so they break down in about 4 or 5, another group will get engines, so you guys rotate around. So one night you might get engines, and your team, you'll divide it between the engines, one of you will be doing so many work cards, and then in the interior you'll be doing repairs, and it might even be movements of the seats. We move seats a lot. When a business gets slow, the airline will take seats out. It makes the airplane lighter, but also we spread them out, and now the airline can advertise, hey, we've got this kind of leg room. And we want to do it anyways because we've got an airplane that's maybe 75, 80% capacity. We take out those seats and spread them out. We tell everybody we got great leg room. We don't tell them when we move them back when it gets busier.
So Heathcliff was stuck in the plane for 2 weeks.
Did you find a dead body?
It was so each night when we did the crew briefing, you got cat duty. You have 2 guys going through a 747, crawling, flashlights, whatever they thought. They'd be bringing pieces of their lunch, and everybody wanted to be the person that got that cat out of the airplane. And they finally caught it.
There's nothing like the
Was
smell
it
of
dead or
cat
alive?
hair
Did
here.
they catch it? Or did they
Yeah, they caught it.
Oh, God.
Dead or alive?
Who was the guy cleaning up the cat shit?
You know what? I mean, you're gonna have urine too, which is corrosive.
Yeah.
Was it dead or alive when they
It was alive. We returned it.
like barely? What was it eating for the past 2 weeks?
You know, I don't doubt it was probably getting into the galleys
Yeah.
at night.
There was
We
this-
get
Cats are
birds.
smart, you know.
I mean, we would, in the hangars, the birds would knew the airplanes had food on. They'd come in the hangars and go into the airplanes, and you'd walk in to do maintenance on the airplane. A couple of birds that scatter out of the galley, and you're deep in a hangar. The birds knew where the food was, and I'm sure the cat was finding it too.
And the birds.
We were talking, I mentioned last night that pilots and maintenance don't always get along. It was classic. I was flying from San Diego to St. Louis, 3.5 hours. It was an MD-80. I don't expect you to necessarily know that one is, but I had a bulkhead behind me, a wall. And when they do that, when the seat's in front of the bulkhead, it's required that we lock out the recline on that seat so it doesn't recline against that wall. So I'm non-rev, which means I'm flying for free. I'm in regular clothes, and I'm sitting next to another non-rev, and he's a pilot, and we are getting along great. And just as we're starting to taxi out, somehow I relayed to him that I was maintenance. And I guarantee that, I tell you, that man did not speak another word to me from that one. He was like my best buddy, and when I told him I was maintenance, he went silent and looked straight at it and did not even acknowledge my existence after that. The best part of that, as we were climbing out, we were both on these seats that didn't recline. I'm maintenance. So I reach under the
I
seat
didn't think
and I
about that.
grab that hydrolock and I fully recline. I mean, there was 2 feet behind that seat. And I fully reclined, and it's 3.5 hours that guy sat. Straight up and down.
Stiff as a board.
I closed my eyes and I didn't even look over.
Or bugging the whole time.
Don't mess with the help. I mean, I'm joking. You never mess with the help. I teach my son that. You never know when you're going to want or need somebody.
Right? Yeah, in fact, the mechanic taught me that lock trick.
Okay, I'm going to take a roll. Anyone that was supposed to be here last night that wasn't. Okay, I didn't take roll last night because I was having so much fun. Let's see. We are. Okay, Mohammed's here. Thank you. And Ben Andrews, thank you. Adrian, thank you. Ralph. Do I have a Ralph? Okay. Andrew Deans.
Here.
Greg Finch. Here. Thank you. Fady Gouda. Mr. Gouda. Okay, he was here 2 nights ago. Somebody called and said they'd be late too. Jesse Hernandez. And Jason Hernandez. Andrew Jones. Thank you. I'm going to learn your names before long. John Jude. Thank you. Kaava. Kaava. Jacob. Oh, okay. Richard. Here. Cupcake. I want to say cupcake. I'm not surprised. Tyler. Joseph Mateus, thank you. Christian Perolero. Christian Perolero. Okay, that's a no. It's thinking fast. It looks like, yeah, Gabe Rodriguez. Thank you.
You understand that?
Nick
Yeah,
Vargas.
I just found it the other day. I don't know where
Here.
swapping cars.
Jose Villa. I think he was a no.
I had one
Scott
like it,
Wang.
but didn't have room. They didn't have this- Same model, but now without the solar panel.
Roger,
Towards the end.
Fritz,
He's the one that's,
But that's.
he's
He's
running
out,
late.
like you said, after.
He's out.
You know, it
Okay,
does-
that's right. We talked about
he
that.
talked
He told me how it does the.
Nick Castillo, thank
So,
you.
yeah, it comes in handy, you know, when you're.
Takes a lot of work done.
Chris Ranch, is that right?
Yeah, when you wanted to convert. Yeah, you wanted to-
Dana Sellis.
Fraction.
John Yorba, thank you. Jeff Durant. And looks like Renee. Priyo. This is the guy that came in late, like the last 10 minutes of the last class. Okay, so we think pretty quick. Hopefully they'll be back. I got a couple more things I'll show you because we've got time. This was taken, picture was taken by a passenger. The airlines don't like passengers taking these kind of pictures. This is the EEC, this is electronic engine control. That's about the size of a suitcase. And that box, I think last I heard, cost right around $600,000.
wow. People don't have any idea what the engines cost on a jet. They go, my airfare is so expensive. I go, what's that engine cost? I don't know, $10.
Just the cowling alone on this aircraft is, I think, close to $1 million.
Yeah.
The cowls, part of the reverser assembly, not just the engine.
Reverse assembly? So when the fans go backwards? You said, no, seriously, the reverse?
On these, this type of reverser has this whole sleeve, this blue section slides back, and doors close as a result. They're called blocker doors. And then there's this screen or grate, and it's kind of like the vents on the dash of your car, but they're directed forward. So this cold air stream hits these blocker doors, and this pressure builds and is forced through these screens and drive backwards. I can't say it works. I don't know how much percentage of thrust you get.
There must be something, I mean, they put them on all the larger versions.
Oh no, they do work. I mean, not only in the sense that you are no longer providing forward thrust is a big part of it alone. And then that you can direct any of it in reverse is going to help at all. I'm used to C-130 where you can change the pitch of the blades and throttle up. You can get 80% of your forward potential thrust in the opposite direction. That thing will stop. You get on the brakes and you slam it in reverse and throttle up, man, that thing will. They've landed, what did they do? I know they took off. They had to have landed. They landed on an aircraft carrier. They took off one time just to make sure, to see how feasible it was.
Just to try it?
Yeah, well, I think they were thinking if it was really easy, we might do it a bunch of times.
Oh, okay.
It might be something fun, or handy.
Something fun.
I mean handy, because it would be a great deal to be able to move a C-130 out remotely and bring it back to an ocean base. But I think it was probably squirrely enough that they said, yeah, we're not going to do that again.
How does your space safe life, the aircraft bring this?
So there's another angle. That's from the passenger area. And then they throw a blanket over it. It's the first chance they get. As soon as everybody runs out there.
What was the cause? Was something not fastened?
Yeah. The maintenance when they're in there, they're supposed to latch it shut.
Sure.
That's probably somebody's house.
But not only that, but this thing, there's about 4 latches on here, and they're tricky, and they generally have to be done in a certain order. And sometimes it takes a little bumping. Sometimes you struggle with those latches, and they have to be adjusted right. But if you, I don't know what the situation was in this one. It is possible that if one came loose, 1 or 2, or maybe they just did one, who knows, but there could be enough force to break the others if you start to catch, because there's a fair amount of vibration here in airflow. So I got that. show you, and then we'll get into some.
Oh, Mr. Sibo?
Yes.
And what about the pieces that flew off of the cowling?
We just hope that no one ever says or sees those again.
Oh, my gosh.
They're in a field somewhere.
We always cross our fingers. No, there was one time we had a farm truck show up with one of these engine cowlings to return it to us because it had our logo on the side. And he said, hey, we found this, it's fell in our field, and you're, yeah, thanks, we'll take it. But we'd rather just assume that they just were never heard from again. We get blue ice too.
Yeah.
Is that?
That's lab water.
Yes.
Yeah. What it is the lav tank, it's pretty critical that they be airtight. Cruise altitude, when you're at cruise, that is minus 50 Fahrenheit typically. So you're talking 80 below freezing. So it's super cold out there. So you get a very tiny leak. That lav leaks just a little bit. As soon as it runs out on the fuselage, it freezes pretty quick. And it builds and builds. You get this big blue icicle, just like you do on the edge of your house in the winter. And then this thing gets so big to where you get to the point where it's big enough and you have enough vibration, or the airplane starts to descend where the air starts to get a little warmer or less cold, and it separates from the airplane. These things can be 20, 30 pounds, and they have gone through people's roofs. And you're talking sewage water, blue stuff. When you jack a 747, there's a tail support. That once you've got it jacked for added security, you slide in this tail jack, and it just kind of rests there. But if you lower the airplane and you forget to remove that, you don't follow procedures, then this tends to happen to your 747. This is a delay.
That's a delay.
Well,
That might be a junkyard.
You know, it all depends. These airplanes are assembled in sections.
Yeah.
They may get some suicidal guys with parachutes to fly it back to Boeing, and the aileron, all the wings. There's a lot of structure that's still good.
That's D for Deutschland, that's German. Luftwaffe.
Yeah, look at all the rippling. So they lowered it with the tail jack still in.
Oops. They don't make mistakes, the Germans.
Wow,
They did that there.
contract guys.
They did that day.
I was on rear jack duty. Sorry.
Along with cat duty,
I
right?
had it unemployed. And in Germany. Probably could. That's like straight up negligence right there. Just explore your orange, explore your orange juice. It does, you can't let them walk away from that.
I've got a couple things in here. I'm not even sure what they are. I haven't looked at it in a while. Email and stuff. Just this is a. Trying to see what kind of, they're calling it an X, these new computers. Yeah, so much with stop on. They're calling it an X48B.
That's supposed to be the next generation airliner.
Yeah,
After the 780.
I think so. They're talking about making this whole area in the middle passenger seats. So you're like almost like a classroom where it's
Seating.
wide. So essentially a flying wing. And there's a fair amount of efficiency involved because now, like on a typical airplane, you don't gain lift out of the fuselage. But with this, the area that would normally encompass the fuselage, you're gaining lift from the whole thing's away.
Makes sense.
Good try.
Most of you have seen these. These are fairly well known.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is that Ocean 11?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, 10-11.
It is, you know, I have St. Louis, when American bought TWA,
It's one of the car.
we put everything that had TWA's logo on it in a room, a storage room. Everything, pens, pencils, American didn't wanna see that logo. And we had a 747 and a TriStar, the ones that hung in the lobby. And I've got the 1011, it's got original TWA colors, like a 6-foot wingspan, it's hanging from my ceiling.
That's cool.
It's huge. TriStar.
Oh my gosh.
Set your brakes,
Pinnacle.
or don't back up too close, I don't know what he did there, but that's, ouch. That's a delay.
That's it. Like,
It's definitely a bad day.
And it wouldn't surprise me if the pilot's still in there, it's possible. I don't see any doors hanging open. He might still be waiting. We saw that one. We saw that one.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good one.
James
What is that?
and Russian too.
Sounded like a good idea.
But it was like,
Wasn't that thick enough, huh?
oh, so.
Yeah, it is. Cargo door. And that's gonna ground that airplane until they do full inspection. They're gonna have to open up panels around the door frame. And, yeah, that thing will be down for a couple of days. That's when you just almost have enough fuel. We saw that one.
Poor kid.
This one is just silly caption, but the Mandarin Airlines, it's the very same airplane is on its back upside down.
That's
Wow.
I don't look like most people.
You'll never get me up one of those things, and that's the mechanic.
I don't know if that's bold.
There's the crack. That's a favorite. Okay, I don't think anyone else is going to show up. I see an MD-80. Oh yeah, this one's. I'll come over with it. I think I made this selection already. That's an MD-80. This is what happens when you land too hard.
Woof.
Oh, that was a test they did.
Yeah, that was done intentionally.
That was done.
Imagine the pilot is like,
Oh,
yeah, that'll work. Sounds interesting. The wheels seem to put up with some.
Yeah.
Was it? Scan pound.
Okay.
We'll make it bounce. An extra seatbelt.
No.
Okay, so we're doing chapter 10, pages 1 through 21. You all read this last night, I'm sure. I'm going to do a little reading. I'm going to try to keep it to a minimum. Yeah, love that. Okay, this chapter, we're into Introduction to Electricity and Electronics. This chapter addresses the fundamental concepts of building blocks for advanced electrical knowledge and practical troubleshooting. Some of the questions addressed here are, how does energy travel through copper wire and through space? What is electric current, electromotive force, and what makes a landing light turn on or a hydraulic pump motor run? Each of these questions requires an understanding of the basic principles. By adding one basic idea on top of the other, it becomes possible to answer the most of the interesting and practical questions about electricity and electrons. I can't scroll up on that one. Okay. Our understanding of electrical current must begin with the nature of matter. All matter is composed of molecules. All molecules are made up of atoms, which are themselves made up of electrons, protons, and neutrons. So, matter. Matter can be defined as anything that has mass and has volume, and is the substance by which physical objects are composed. So it's anything that can be touched. Mass is the amount of matter in a given object. Mass is the amount of matter in a given object. Typically, the more matter there is in an object, the more mass it will have. Weight is an indirect method of determining mass. So we have volume. We can have two objects that are identically the same size, they would have the same volume. But the heavier one's going to have more mass. The four categories of states are solids, liquids, gases, and plasma. Okay, so this one you don't have to, this is just a nice to know, and I don't think you're going to see this again, but it's in the book. Plasma is a hot ionized gas consisting of approximately equal numbers of positively charged ions and negatively charged electrons. The characteristics of plasma are significantly different from those of ordinary neutral gases, so the plasmas are considered a distinct fourth state of matter. Does that tell you anything? That means little or nothing to me. But apparently it tells you in here, like 90, there it is, somewhere in there. 99% of our visible universe, and most of that, yeah, plasmas are the most common state of matter in the universe, comprising more than 99% of our visible universe, and most of that is not visible. I still don't know what matter is, but
Plasma.
yeah, plasma. Plasma, thank you. Okay, so element, we talked about this. I'll give you the quiz next time. An element is a substance that cannot be reduced to a simpler form by chemical means. Iron, gold, silver, copper, and oxygen are examples of elements. Beyond this point of reduction, the element ceases to be what it is. So you got a periodic table. These are elements. These are at their lowest form. Okay, so what is an element? A substance composed of a single kind of atom. It cannot be broken down into another substance by chemical or physical means. So this is a lithium ion, and it would be an element, and then water would be an example of a compound, because it is both hydrogen and oxygen. So a compound is two or more elements, but an element is at its lowest form. That will be on a couple quizzes and tests. So know the difference between an element and a compound. And there it is. A compound is a chemical combination of two or more elements, water being the most common. Okay, the atom is considered to be the most basic building block of all matter. They are composed of three substances, protons, neutrons, and electrons. The three particles will determine the properties of specific atoms. Elements are substances composed of the same atoms with specific properties. So oxygen is an example of this. The main property that defines each element is the number of neutrons, protons, and electrons. It goes on, I think it tells us about hydrogen.
What's the difference between a molecule and a compound?
A molecule, anyone know offhand?
Molecules.
The smallest particle of matter.
I think a molecule is a compound, isn't it?
That's
No.
what it.
Yeah.
That's
It's not
what
an element.
Okay, they're showing water molecule would be an example of a compound.
Yeah.
H2O. So it's well, the molecule would be the group or the unit, the combination. So water would be a in the form of a molecule. So a molecule would be more along the lines of a compound. So there it is, nucleus, proton, neutron, electron. I will be asking you if it doesn't come up next, but which one is positive, negative, and neutral?
electrons are negative.
Electrons are negative,
Because it's not just.
Protons are positive.
protons, and then neutrons are neutral. Okay, so we mentioned a little bit about this when I talked about conductors and insulators. Valence electrons. Valence is the number of chemical bonds an atom can form. Valence electrons are electrons that can participate in chemical bonds with other atoms. The number of electrons in the outermost shell of the atom is the determining factor in its valence. Therefore, the electrons contained in the shell are called valence electrons. So the outermost ring of electrons are the valence electrons. That's when you'll be asked from time to time throughout our quizzes and tests. It may typically ask you what determines a good conductor or a good insulator. This you can answer the same way. You can say the number of electrons in the valence shell. So here's an example, valence electrons of oxygen and neon. Oxygen has 8 electrons and 6 valence electrons. So use the valence of the outermost ring. Neon, which is a gas, 10 electrons, 8 valence electrons. I think that was part of the text. I don't know how helpful that is.
So the least, if you have less electrons in the valence shell, then it's more conductive.
Yes. Yeah. What was someone's explanation the first day? Someone was telling me why.
Oh, because they'd rather give up those outer ones and have a complete shell underneath that, freely give those electrons up to have that innermost complete shell.
Yeah. The better conductor has the fewest number, so it seems to give up its last electrons easily. To me, it's counterintuitive. I would think since what the current electron flow are these valence shell electrons. These are what are moving. So they move from, if I've got a section of copper wire, the copper has fewer electrons. Copper has fewer electrons in the valence shell, and as this one atom moves to the next similar atom, it will bump its atom over. So it's kind of like a domino effect. But I'm thinking electron flow, I would think the most practical would be the more electrons I have available would be the best at moving electrons in conductor, but it's the opposite. So the more electrons in the valence shell, it makes for a better insulator. We have what's called a semiconductor. We often want a good conductor, a good insulator, but sometimes we want something in between. We don't always want free flow, but we want some flow. An example would be a resistor. We're going to learn more about resistors in the next few days. But a resistor reduces the amount of current. So free electrons. Valence electrons are found drifting midway between two nuclei. Some electrons are more tightly bound to the nucleus of their atom than others and are positioned in a shell or sphere close to the nucleus, while others are more loosely bound and orbit at a greater distance from the nucleus. These outermost electrons are called free electrons because they can be easily dislodged from the positive attraction of the protons in the nucleus. Once freed from the atom, the electron can then travel from atom to atom, becoming the flow of electrons commonly called current in a practical electrical circuit. So that's our electricity, these valence shells moving from atom to atom. There's just a picture of them all just shifting from one to the next to the next. So conductors, elements such as gold, copper, and silver possess many free electrons and make good conductors. The atoms in these materials have a few loosely bound electrons in their outer orbits. And that outer orbit, again, is your valence shell. Energy in the form of heat can cause these electrons in the outer orbit to break loose and to drift throughout the material. Copper and silver have one electron in their outer orbits. At room temperature, a piece of silver wire will have billions of free electrons. A piece of silver wire, so we're talking about a piece of, some mass material, so it's going to have multiple electrons. I'm sorry, and multiple atoms. So there's wire. This is a stranded wire. You can see the copper conductor in the middle and the insulator on the outer edge. I'll mention it when I can, and this is a test question on the end. Asks you why we use stranded wire rather than solid.
Flexibility.
Flexibility. A great example would be landing gear, or even the wings that flex. You want this type of wire will flex more and resist breaking over time. There's also a test question later on, and we'll review all this, but asks for good characteristics of insulation, wire insulation. Can you think just a little common sense what things we might want? Other
Water
than good insulation?
prevention, water prevention,
Wear prevention?
water.
Water, yeah. Keeping water, fuel, hydraulic materials out, being chemical resistant, being moisture resistant, being flexible at a wide range of temperatures. Again, cruise altitude is minus 50 Fahrenheit, 80 below freezing. So a lot of these wires can become brittle. ESD. Anyone know what ESD stands for? Electrostatic discharge. One of the most frequent causes of damage to a solid state component or integrated circuit is electrostatic discharge from the human body when one of these devices is handled. Careless handling of line replaceable units. This is a common term, LRU. When you are troubleshooting aircraft, it is the black boxes in the electronics bay are typically called LRUs. It's a line replaceable unit. And amazing the technology with these boxes now. The pilot will have a display screen and he gets a message. All it says is maintenance. It depends on the aircraft, but it may just say maintenance. And he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't have, all he's supposed to do is tell maintenance that he's got a maintenance indication. And then maintenance will come in and they'll reveal other pages and it'll tell them to interrogate a particular box in the electronics bay. And some of them are self-testing. So a lot of your troubleshooting is checking the display in the cockpit and then going through procedures to find this other box, doing a self-test on the box. And the box will tell you in many cases that if it's bad or if it's got something, a bad sensor in a particular location. And then you just pull the unit out and replace it in many cases. That's considered an LRU. And they are susceptible to electrostatic discharge. So careless handling of LRU circuit cards and discrete components can cause unnecessarily time-consuming and expensive repairs. I can't offhand think of what a discrete component is, but you've got circuit boards. I'm thinking that may be an example. You'll open a box that has circuit boards like in a computer that are slid in, and you want to put on a ESD electrostatic wrist strap. If you work on your computer home at much, usually I will put my hand on the chassis once I've got it open before I start handling cards, because you want to equalize the electricity.
So this is kind of off topic, but it's still related to this.
Uh-huh.
So for helicopters, they have a ESD. It's this little cable that comes out and it'll touch the ground before the wheels do.
Yeah.
So does that just prevent somebody in the cabin getting out and they still have that charge on them?
It
I don't
could.
understand.
What that does is it balances the electrostatic charge from the aircraft to the ground.
Because it's not going to go through the tires, right? It's just gotta go
No, it's not going to go because your tires are insulated. So they're trying to. And if you were to walk up, you could get a static discharge. More than likely, they're trying to prevent. I'm trying to think.
Used to discharge it before we landed on the ship, because obviously they're standing on.
You want a static discharge, and I was thinking for fuel vapor or things like that. But once you land, if there's fuel vapor, that little static wick is going to create a spark then and there. But the whole idea is to eliminate static, the difference between the ground and the aircraft. But I don't necessarily know the exact reason. I know that's what's happening. if I think about it or I find out, I'll bring it.
Would drag on the aircraft just cause static electricity, like friction on against
Yeah.
the air?
That creates it, yes. Whereas the airplane is flying through the air and your blades, the friction through the air creates static electricity.
Right, yeah, so the aircraft makes some static electricity through its flight, and as you're landing,
It dissipates
it's
through
gonna
that.
dissipate through there, but what are the people inside the cabin?
They're safe. I mean,
I'm
it's
sure, but I thought there was like some kind of issue, like either people trying to get in, like, cause I mean, the aircraft will be on the ground, and it'll have that charge cable touching the ground, but we still put like an extra, what's that line called?
grounding
We still
cable.
ground it still again,
Yeah.
I don't really get the.
We try to avoid static electricity around aircraft for lots of reasons. ESD is one of them, but usually, especially like fueling procedures. You can have vapor, fuel vapor, liquid oxygen servicing. There's lots of reasons to avoid spark around aircraft. You're talking military too.
Don't we just, the wings, don't we, static wings, or don't we discharge electricity?
They do. He's talking a helicopter and something that touches the ground as it sets down.
Yeah, they have.
And I was just going to talk about that. Aircraft on the trailing edge of the wings have a little static wick. There's usually a little piece of fiberglass with a wire in it, and it vibrates. And I'm sure you've all pulled clothes out of the dryer and you shake them, and you feel the static. You can get rid of that static cling by shaking it. That's the same thing. Aircraft on the trailing edge will have these little static wicks. And just that little bit of vibration kind of just whisks off that static and minimizes its build in flight. I'll see if I can find out and answer your question. Okay, so how many volts does it take to damage a computer component? Well, it takes an electrostatic discharge of 3,000 volts for you to feel a shock. And 3,000 volts sounds a lot, but it's not the voltage that hurts, it's the amps. 3,000 volts for you to feel a shock. Much smaller charges, well below the threshold of human sensation, can often do damage to semiconductor devices. Many of the more sophisticated electrical components can be damaged at a voltage as low as 10 volts. So when you touch a doorknob, you may think, oh, I'll feel, or I can sense if I have a static discharge. When you feel it, when you touch that door, you're at 3,000 volts and higher. That's where you perceive that little snap, that little discharge. But you know, at a mere fraction of that, 10 volts, you can do damage to very sensitive electronics. So that's where we use the bonding strap. The strap is really a protective device for you also. You could get a pretty good jolt or shock by handling electronics. If you were to touch a hot wire, a hot component, something with voltage on it, it's going to want to travel through you to the chassis. So you don't necessarily want a copper wire wrapped around your arm and to the aircraft chassis, because now you're a perfect ground. You touch something hot, you know, you're part of the circuit. You're going to get cooked. So this little strap protects you from that. It allows just enough pathway for the static to dissipate, but not so much of a current path that you're part of the circuit and cooking meat.
How does it exactly damage the electronics? What does it do?
You ever put something like with foil in a microwave? It essentially does the same thing, except on a very microscopic level. These electronic components, they're using high-tech lasers to just etch the most minute, thousandths of a hair, little lines that electricity pulses can travel. Computer chip. The computer chips are getting smaller and smaller, and the computer chips are limited by the laser that can cut them, to cut these little tiny pathways. So you're talking about a little piece of copper or silver or gold that is thousandths of the thickness of a hair, and a static discharge can just take them and cook them like what you see is that sparking in the microwave.
Like bees were the only thing we can cook.
You guys are too young to know, but I think when I was in college, early college, where there was a hot dog cooker called Hot Dogger. I wouldn't expect you to know what it was, but it was called a Hot Dogger. and it opened, and it had these prongs on both sides, and you would take your hot dog and stick it across the prongs and close the lid, and you plug it into the wall, and it literally just put 120 volts through that hot dog, and it would start to cook and sizzle. And that's meat, you know, and voltage. I actually made one I packed it in my lunch. It was an electrical cord with just 2 nails soldered to it, and you know, just for fun, and I could do it. I could cook my hot dog at any outlet. Put it on my paper plate, stick the nails in each end of the hot dog, and plug it into the wall.
Oh, ready for that tomorrow, truck come by.
And in about 30 seconds, that thing was darkening and sizzling. So when you're handling ESD components, you get it'll come in a pouch, and if you're working at a station, you'll have typically it's a blue or black mat that's also grounded where you'll do work. If you're in the airplane, you'll put your bonding strap on before you start removing it from its packaging. But you'll do all your work with the bonding strap on. I might have a picture. There it is.
So what do you clip it to?
You clip it to structure, aircraft structure.
Oh, okay, so you have the.
Some of these, depending on, like some aircraft, many aircraft will have a plug. It'll have a little banana plug on it, and it'll have a place to plug it in, and this will actually be in a little envelope or a little compartment in the electronics bay. So you always have it there. Some of them will have this, and it'll have a little lug that's labeled ground point. But you put that on your wrist and plug it in, and then you do your work.
Isn't this the same one that the fueler used?
Similar, yeah. What the fueler is using when he hooks up his, the fueler will typically ground the aircraft's generally already grounded to the ground, but then the fueler grounds his truck to the ground, and then he'll ground his truck to the aircraft. But that's quite a bit heavier, and there's no and there have been times, I haven't seen it myself, where people have told me those grounding wires will heat up and start to smoke because as they're pumping that fuel, they're creating electricity at a faster rate than that ground wire wants to dissipate it.
What about cement head? Did he use?
Yeah, I don't know. I hope so. I suspect he's no longer alive. Okay, electromagnetism. In 1820, the Danish physicist Hans Christian Ørsted, you won't be tested on that, discovered that the needle of a compass brought near a current-carrying conductor would be deflected. Come on in. Just so I got you here, you are
Routing challenge.
where's my regular sheet here? Got it, okay, thanks.
Did you say you will be tested on that? Or
You won't be tested on that. This is nice to know. You won't be tested on that crack in the aircraft window. It's just nice to know. It wouldn't surprise me if you see a crack just like that, knowing the way maintenance goes.
It's late at night.
I thought I was in trouble one time. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm walking across the ramp with my toolbox, and there's an airplane maintenance being towed by maintenance, and they flashed their brights on me. The whole airplane lit up. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and I knew it's cats. I knew, so I mooned them and kept going. Well, when I got in the hangar, the supervisor comes out and says, "Scott, get your toolbox. You're no longer with us." And I'm going, "No." And what it was, I thought I was getting canned for mooning. Who knows who it could have been? I figured it was like other mechanics. It was. What it was is I was working the hangar, and they needed me out in the gate area. So he said, "Seabog, get your toolbox. You're no longer with us," meaning I was going to work in another area, but I thought I was fired. So I was a little more careful who I moved after that. And then another time where you got guys on headsets. We're running engines. We got a guy on the ground. The guy on the ground is Hispanic. And in the cockpit, a couple of white guys, and we typically say "stand by one." It means wait. Stand by one. And the guy on the ground is starting to get agitated. The engines are running. He's got his headphones on. And he's going, hey, I forget what he was saying, and the guy running the engine is going, stand by one. And he finally comes back and goes, my name is not Juan.
Oh, no.
Okay, so when the current flow stopped, the compass needle returned to its original position. So Oersted realized that he brought the compass close to a wire that had current in it, and it would move, it would deflect. So essentially he found out that electric wires create a magnetic field. The important discovery demonstrated a relationship between electricity and magnetism that led to the electromagnet, can't talk tonight, electromagnet, and to many of the inventions on which the modern industry is based. So it was pretty huge finding out that that wires carry electromagnetic fields. That's where we get an electromagnet, and that's the basis for how our analog multimeter works. Oersted discovered that the magnetic field had no connection with the conductor, no physical connection in which the electrons were flowing, because the conductor was made of non-magnetic copper. The electrons moving through the wire created a magnetic field around the conductor. The greater the current flow, the greater the magnetic field. So he realized with increasing current that needle in the compass deflected more. When a wire contains many such loops, it's called a coil. Pardon. By placing soft iron bar inside the coil, the lines of force will be concentrated in the center of the coil. So what they're saying is you can put a piece of iron and wrap around the iron, and that iron tends to funnel or direct this magnetic field. The strength of the magnetic field of the electromagnet can be increased by either increasing the flow of the current or increasing the number of loops in the wire. And that'll come up later when we look at transformers. Doubling the number of loops approximately doubles the magnetic field strength. Doubling the amount of current will also do the same thing. Electromagnets are used in electrical instruments, motors, generators, relays, and other devices. So there's their iron core, and they found that by putting the iron core in the coil, it tends to give us more of a directs that concentrates it, I guess, along a path. Okay, I mentioned this the other night. We call this conventional flow and electron flow. Today's technician will find that there are two competing schools of thought based on the flow or the direction of flow of electricity. The two are called the conventional current theory and the electron theory. Conventional flow of the two, the conventional current theory is the first to be developed and thought in many years to be. So conventional flow is where we believe that electrons move from positive to negative. And we pretty much everybody teaches conventional flow. It has so permeated the industry that it doesn't matter, and we'd just be shooting ourselves in the foot by trying to change everybody. But the electron flow is the concept where electrons flow literally from the negative to the positive. So electron flow. Later discoveries were made that prove that just the opposite is true. Electron flow is what actually happens where an abundance of electrons flow out of the negative source to an area that lacks electrons or the positive source. So since the positive aspect, the protons don't move, the electrons move. So we get movement from a high area to a low area in pressure, weather, electrons. So the only way we get electrons to move in that direction is to have more electrons here than over there. If there's very few electrons on this end, that's the positive end, because it's more positive than negative. So that's the electron flow. Literally, the electrons are flowing negative to positive. But again, we are teaching electron or the conventional flow, positive, negative. It won't make a difference. So electromotive force or voltage. There's where our E comes from on our chart. Actually, we're using volts here. But when I ask for, you'll see E in places like on the questions. E total. Unlike current, which is easy to visualize as a flow, voltage is a variable that is determined between 2 points. Often, we refer to voltage as a value across 2 points. It is the electromotive force or the push or pressure. And that's a good way to see electricity. It is a pressure. It's a difference between the positive and negative side. It's a push or pressure felt in the conductor that ultimately moves the electrons in a flow. The symbol for EMF is the capital E. And they're showing you how it compares to a liquid. If you've got a liquid of a higher level and a lower one, the force or pressure is going to be towards the lower pressure area. How are we doing on time? It's 5:35. We'll give you a break if you're not dying too bad in about 15 minutes.